countdown to Election Day, where state races across the country will offer a sense of how voters feel about President Trump and his administration and the Democratic Party as a whole. In Virginia, Democrat Abigail Spanberger is leading Republican Winsome Earl Sears, the lieutenant governor, by 14 points, according to a poll by YouGov. More than 1 million people have voted already, which is at a higher rate than in the 2021 election. And 376 miles north in New Jersey, the gubernatorial race could be very close, while a recent Quinnipiac poll has Democrat Mikey Sherrill 8 points ahead of Republican Jack Ciattarelli. A recent, Suffolk poll has Sherrill only 4 points ahead, and that lead is within the margin of error. In Pennsylvania, Democrats and their allies are pouring millions of dollars into a campaign to stop a late-emerging Republican effort to oust 3 Democratic justices in the state Supreme Court, spending in the race on track to exceed $15 million, showing just how critical the election is for the highest court in the largest presidential battleground. Democratic National Committee Chair Ken Martin warned of the risks if the 3 justices are not retained, emphasizing that it would give Republicans the opportunity to threaten Pennsylvania's abortion rights and anti-gerrymandering rulings. Martin is also boosting his support for Zohran Mamdani in the New York City mayoral race. Though he only openly asked New Yorkers to vote for Mamdani a few weeks ago, he had previously congratulated Mamdani on his primary win in June. DNC Chair Ken Martin joins us now. Thank you very much, Chairman, for joining. You have quite a busy weekend, so we appreciate you making the time.
Absolutely.
When you look at the 3 races that we're really looking at, right, with the people, you have Abigail Spanberger, Mikey Sherrill, Zohran Mamdani. These are now possibly going to be leaders in the Democratic Party. What is the through line on the argument that they're making to voters?
Well, the through line for all 3 of them is they're focused on affordability. They're focused on making people's lives easier to live, whether it's in New York City or whether it's in Richmond, Virginia, or whether it's in Trenton, New Jersey. All 3 of those candidates are focused on economic issues, making sure people understand that it's the Democratic Party that best represents their opportunity to climb the economic ladder, to actually achieve the American dream, to actually get ahead, not just get by. And that's, there's all this hubbubaloo about, the Democratic Party, and what does it mean about Zohran's race in New York? Does it mean the party's going left? I mean, look at throughout
does it?
Well, no. I mean, look at throughout the country, right? We are a big tent party. We have all sorts of Democrats, conservative Democrats, centrists, progressives, and leftists. And I've always believed that you win through addition, not through subtraction, that this is the beauty of the Democratic Party, right? We need to find candidates who fit their districts and then support them. And at the end of the day, that's what you see, right? We're not like the Republicans where we, march lockstep and drum people out if they dissent or there's debate or there's differences of opinion. But let me say, the through line on all of our candidates running, and there's 100,000 local elections on the ballot this year that get missed, mayoralships, county board seats, school board seats.
School boards are very important, folks.
They are, that's
very
right.
Important.
But in all of those cases, people are focused on actually how do we improve people's lives. At a time when you have Donald Trump literally throwing, Great Gatsby parties while people are starving in this country, at a time when, people are getting kicked off of their health insurance and Donald Trump's focused on marble bathrooms in the White House. I mean, that shows you which party is focused, where their priorities are. Donald Trump is focused on his billionaires' friends and building ballrooms, and the Democrats are focused on actually improving your life.
But finding candidates and support who fit their district and supporting them, what you just said that you have encouraged others in the Democratic Party to do and that what the party needs to do. That is not what Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries have done when it comes to Zohran Mamdani. Hakeem Jeffries supported Mamdani, I think just last week it was, after avoiding and dodging an endorsement for several months. And Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has yet to do so. What is your response to that? And do you think that these 2 leaders have the vision and the ability to help modernize and rebuild the Democratic Party?
I can't speak for Chuck Schumer or for Hakeem Jeffries. They speak for themselves. I can speak for this Democratic Party. At the end of the day,
you can speak for yourself.
Well, of course. How I led in Minnesota, I want to be very clear. In Minnesota, I always led a big tent party, right? We have all sorts of Democrats in Minnesota. I said this, in the 5th Congressional District, I have Ilhan Omar, who is a leftist and a friend of mine. Right next to her was Dean Phillips, a centrist, Democrat, a friend of mine. Right next to him for years was a guy named Colin Peterson, who is a blue dog Democrat. All 3 of them are important. Why are they important? Because while they represent widely different views, for sure, all 3 of them represent their district and all 3 of them win. I couldn't run Ilhan and Dean's district and win any more than I could run Dean and Ilhan's district and win.
Right.
This is the challenge for the Democratic Party. When we try to actually say there's one way or one stripe of being a Democrat, it ignores our history. It ignores who we are. I represented the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. We are a coalition. Now, let me just say this. I don't work for Chuck Schumer or for Hakeem Jeffries, right? I was elected to lead the Democratic Party, the largest institution in the Democratic ecosystem, and that's what I'm going to do.
But as a leader of the party, do you think that Schumer and Jeffries have the ability to rebuild and modernize the party and take the party forward?
I believe that they're going to do their best to help us win next November.
You talked a lot about the great state of Minnesota. You know I love Minnesota, being a graduate of Carleton College.
Yes.
But let's talk about New Jersey and the New Jersey race. Folks are focused on Virginia, and Abigail Spamberger's numbers are great. But as we showed in the New Jersey race, depending on the poll you're looking at, Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, she's in a statistical dead heat, especially that Suffolk poll, which I want to point people at. It's within the margin of error, but the sample size is only 500. The poll where she's up by 8 points has a sample size of 1,100 people, so that's a little more reliable. But as the leader of the DNC, how concerned are you? Let me put it this way. Are you as concerned as I am, Mr. Chairman, that New Jersey might not be as much of a lock as it should be, especially given the fact that Donald Trump only lost New Jersey by less than 6 points, which was a shocker for a lot of people in the last presidential election?
Well, look, I'll just say this again, not to bring it back to Minnesota, but the reason I never lost a statewide election there is because I drowned out the noise. I didn't believe the polls. Whether there was a poll that was up or a poll that was down, I told everyone just ignore them. Keep your eyes focused on what we need to do in these final 3 days left in New Jersey, Virginia, Pennsylvania, California, all throughout the country right now, and we'll put ourselves in a better chance to win. But let me just say this. We always knew that New Jersey was going to be close because of what you just said, right? Which is the Republican Party cut the presidential margin in New Jersey last year in 2024. Jack Ciattarelli only lost to Phil Murphy 4 years earlier by 3 percentage points, and the Republicans are feeling pretty bullish on their chances there. But everything we've seen, and I just got back last night from New Jersey. I was there for 3 days. I was in Pennsylvania 3 days before that. And I will tell you, the energy there is high. And what we're seeing, I was in Morris County kicking off a canvass the other day. Morris County is pretty red, right? And there were hundreds of people there. People had never been there before, volunteering, rolling up their sleeves, getting out there and knocking for Mikey and the rest of the ticket. That's the type of energy that's going to put us over the finish line. And again, in a day right now when people are suffering and they're feeling the economic squeeze, Jack Ciattarelli has not offered up any actual options to improve people's lives. And he's embraced Donald Trump to the detriment of New Jerseyans. That's why Mikey Sherrill is going to win, because she's been focused on the right message.
How much of the shutdown has impacted? You were just in New Jersey, you said. Are people talking about the shutdown? Is the shutdown a factor in this election?
Yeah, of course it is, right? People are anxious about what this means, not just for the people that are going to get kicked off of, nutrition benefits and off of their health care, but people know that, starting this week, they're going to get health insurance premiums, and almost every American is going to see, double-digit, maybe even triple-digit increases in their health insurance. People are anxious right now in this country, and they want someone to stand up and fight for them. And Jack Ciattarelli is not fighting for them. He's spending most of his time kissing Donald Trump's ass instead of actually standing up for New Jerseyans.
Okay, Minnesota.
I've always said, Eugene, don't confuse Minnesota.
Exactly. I want to go up, down, wherever. I want to go to New York from New Jersey. There's an up, down, over. Thank you very much. I'm not good at geography. In New York, you have Zohran Mamdani. You're supporting him. Obviously, he's a Democrat there. But I want to read something that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis posted this week and get your reaction. He says, "Of course, I would rather Mamdani lose. As an American, I want our nation's largest city to do well. As a conservative, I want leftists to lose at the ballot box regardless of jurisdiction. But if NYC voters want to shoot themselves in the foot, I'm not going to sugarcoat the inevitable consequences." What it sounds like to me is that he is going to use Mamdani to color the entire Democratic Party as socialist, democratic socialists who X, Y, and Z, and he'll fill in the blank. How do you, as the leader of the Democratic National Committee, protect the rest of the party from attacks that DeSantis might have in trying to use any leftist or even a super conservative Democrat from coloring the entire party that way?
Well, what I would say is, let's give this guy some time to actually govern, right? When he wins on Tuesday, and then judge him on what he does while he's in office.
Well, DeSantis isn't going to wait to judge him.
Well, sure, but let me say this. I mean, they're going to say that regardless. They've been saying for years that the Democratic Party is socialist, right? And so what I would say is this, at the end of the day, there's many different Democrats out there, and we have so many faces of the Democratic Party, and 3 of them right now are on the ballot this Tuesday. 3, the biggest names in our party, right? Mikey Sherrill, and of course Abigail Spanberger and Zoran Mamdani, and they all are different and unique in different ways. And again, that's the beauty of the Democratic Party. Look, I don't think this is what the Republicans thrive on. Is fear. And I understand the point you're trying to make, but let the guy govern first and then judge him.
Well, it's the point that DeSantis is making, just saying.
I hear you.
Ain't my point.
Democratic National Committee Chairman Ken Martin, thank you very much for coming to the weekend.
Really appreciate it.
My department.
With Empire's Home Floor Advantage, we have clear, all-inclusive pricing. No surprises. And installation is on your schedule.
Call or visit EmpireToday.com and get the Home Floor Advantage.
800-588-2300 Empire. Today, millions of American families are dealing with stress and anxiety over their access to food and health insurance on day 33 of the shutdown. Mounting frustration with congressional deadlock coming from all corners of the country, from kitchen tables to the Oval Office. Both House party leaders having their say this morning.
This is not about winning a political contest here. Real people are losing. The American people are hurting. He is a big-hearted president. He wants everybody to get their services and the health services for veterans and SNAP benefits and all the rest.
It's very unfortunate that Donald Trump and Republicans have decided to weaponize hunger and withhold SNAP benefits, even in contravention of 2 federal courts. We're asking Republicans to sit down, as we've indicated our willingness to sit down with them anytime, any place, anywhere.
Joining us now is Democratic Representative from New Mexico, Melanie Stansbury. Welcome back to the broadcast. So, Congresswoman, we are over a month now into this shutdown, and we've heard rumblings of discussions to end it. You have Texas Senator Ted Cruz, who predicted the government will open on Wednesday or Thursday. What are your Senate colleagues saying behind closed doors? Because you now have the largest federal workers union in the country calling for Democrats to step back from their health care demand and relieve the suffering and the hardship. So are Democrats in this for the long haul, no matter what the pressure?
Yeah, let me just say, Democrats want the government reopened. We have been there every single week since the shutdown happened, but Mike Johnson has completely locked out the House. And in fact, I left Washington, D.C. on Thursday night, and right before I left for the airport, I talked to leadership and I said, are we going to be back in session? Are we going to reopen the government next week? And I was told the indications from Republicans were that they were going to call their own members back next week. But then Friday, 2 days ago, the Speaker of the House canceled votes yet again. So we are now on the 33rd day of the shutdown, and the Speaker of the House is refusing to sit down with Democrats. The president hasn't met with Democrats in over a month. They are refusing to negotiate, and now the president has withheld food assistance for 42 million Americans against 2 court orders. So I find it a hard pill to swallow when I hear Republican leadership trying to pin shutdown blame on Democrats when they have literally had the House out of session for more than a month and are refusing to sit down and negotiate and reopen the government.
You know, to the SNAP benefits there, on Friday, a federal judge did order the Trump administration. They've got to continue paying out SNAP benefits from the emergency fund. The administration has until tomorrow to respond what it plans to do, but that certainly leaves things a bit unsettled still today. New Mexico has some of the highest SNAP participation in this country. You've got more than 457,000 people statewide. It's nearly 22% of the state's population. What are you hearing from your constituents, and can local food banks make up the needed difference?
Yeah, let me be clear first and foremost. Donald Trump is choosing to withhold food assistance from 42 million Americans. There is an emergency contingency fund exactly for emergencies like this. And while the president has found many authorities for which he probably doesn't have the legal or constitutional authority to give bailouts to Argentina to help his billionaire friends, he's demolishing the White House and he's throwing lavish parties at his private club in Florida. He is choosing to let tens of millions of children and elders in this country go without food assistance this weekend. Now, in New Mexico, we have taken the step of making sure that our people can get food on the table. Our governor announced on Thursday that we are making $30 million available and funding about 10 days of emergency food assistance through state funding, but it's not enough to get us through the month. And so these court orders by 2 federal judges on Fridays directing the Trump administration to use emergency contingency funds are vital to make sure that Americans all across the country can put food on the table. And I want to say this, I grew up in a low-income family. I know how vital those extra supplemental funds are for a family. Families do whatever they have to survive, but just that little extra help, that few extra dollars a day could mean the difference between your grandparents, your children, the ability of someone who's sick in your family or disabled or a veteran being able to put food on the table. And I think it's disgusting, immoral, and unconscionable that the administration is actually using food as a weapon against our people while they are throwing parties at a private club in Florida. It's disgusting.
So Democrats are trying to address the perception of the party. But according to a new Washington Post ABC News Ipsos poll, almost 7 in 10 Americans say the Democratic Party is out of touch with the reality of most people. How important is this shutdown fight to turning around that perception? And if Democratic leadership can't do it, what then?
I think that most Americans feel like politicians are out of touch with their everyday needs. And I think that's why some of the people who are poised to win their elections on Tuesday are doing such an extraordinary job of reaching the American people. When you look, for example, at what's happening in the New York City race and the gubernatorial races in New Jersey and in Virginia, the reason why those candidates are doing so well is because they're connecting with voters, because they are telling the people, we care about you. We are fighting to get the government reopened. We're trying to address food assistance. We're trying to address the healthcare crisis. And I think if anyone is grossly out of touch with the American people, it's Donald Trump throwing these lavish parties and building a ballroom in the middle of a shutdown, while real Americans are actually hurting. But, at the end of the day, the most important thing that all of us need to do as leaders and community members is reconnect with our humanity and with each other. And I think that Tuesday's election results are going to show that the American people understand who's with them and who's with the billionaires.
New Mexico Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury, it's always good to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Mr. Mamdani, welcome to the show.
It's such a pleasure to be here, Ellie. I'm sorry that it's not in person, but I look forward to that being the next time.
Well, it's a busy day, as we know, in New York, not just for you because it's the last day of voting, but it is the New York City Marathon, which you were running in last year. It's always an exciting day for us. It's one of the things when you look at the marathon, when you're up on the Upper West Side and you see all the runners closing in, what you realize is, although the world is running in this marathon, it's a real snapshot into how diverse this city is. And the topic of diversity has come up a few times in the past week. Your opponent, Andrew Cuomo, was on this network yesterday morning with my colleagues on the weekend, and he said, quote, "Our diversity is our strength, but it can also be a weakness." Last Wednesday on a podcast, Vice President J.D. Vance said that it's totally reasonable and acceptable for Americans to want to live next to people with whom they have a commonality, like people who speak the same language as them. You come from one of the most diverse parts of New York City. What's your take on this?
Well, I think first, when Andrew Cuomo said that diversity is a weakness, he also then misidentified which black host he was speaking to on this very network. And we're seeing not only is he Donald Trump's puppet, but he's starting to also become Donald Trump's parrot, because we're hearing the very same kind of language of hate and division coming from him in his final acts in public life, out of a desperation and an understanding that the only thing that he's actually cared about all these years, power, is actually slipping away from him. And to hear this from the vice president, it just completely completely reveals what the Republican Party has to offer Americans in this time. The issue is not what language Americans are speaking at the dinner table, it's that they can't afford to put food on it. And I'm proud to be running a campaign that recognizes the belonging of each and every New Yorker, no matter where they were born or when they got here, and is looking to make the most expensive city in the United States of America affordable for all.
Speaking about language, on Vance's comments about stirring up concerns about people who don't speak the same language, this is not a fear that you have. I was not clear on how many languages you seem to be able to speak, but you've made some campaign videos in a few different languages. I just want to have my viewers listen to a couple of them.
Hola, Nueva York. Ya pueden salir a votar y estoy pidiendo su apoyo. Por favor, busque su lugar de votación más cercano y voten por mí para ser su próximo alcalde. مرحبا، أنا اسمي زهران ممداني وعم رشح حالي ليكون العمدة الجديد في مدينة نيويورك. بعرف شو عم تفكروا، شكلي كأني صهركم من الشام، بس العربي تبعي بده شوية شغل.
All right, I'm taking off Spanish and Arabic there. What else do you speak? And again, in a world where people are sort of saying diversity is our problem and you're too diverse and you're a Muslim and this and that, you're fully leaning into this on your social media, that not only do you like diversity, but you practice it.
Yeah, and I think it's what it means to be a New Yorker. Look, I speak English and I speak Hindi, but as you can see, I will try very hard to learn enough of a language to make a video. And there's a reason some of those videos start in the daytime and end in the night, and there's a reason some of those cuts are very, very quick. It's because it takes quite a bit of work.
What's the point? What's the point to New Yorkers? You're not hiding who you are or the fact that you love the diversity of this city and this country.
Yeah, I think the point is understanding what makes New York City such a special place. This is a city of the world. I am representing Queens right now in the state legislature, and it's called the world's borough. And part of that, as you said, is a reflection of the fact that it's one of the most diverse counties in the entire country. And for so long, when people have run for office, they have gone to political consultants and asked them which voters they should focus on. And we wanted to reject that assessment that there was a set of New Yorkers you could leave out on the basis of their voting propensity or on the basis of the languages that they speak. And we wanted to make sure that we brought our political case to each and every person that called the city home. And what we're finding is that when you treat New Yorkers, no matter how often they voted or whether they voted at all, with the respect and dignity that they deserve, they will respond in kind, whether that is speaking about young people, whether that's speaking about immigrant voters, whomever the Andrew Cuomos of the world like to overlook. Those are the very New Yorkers who can also be at the heart of our democratic process.
I had Brad Lander on the show yesterday. You and Brad Lander cross-endorsed each other, and he's out there as a surrogate for you. Let's talk about the continued allegations of anti-Semitism against you. What do you say to a Jewish New York voter who's watching this right now, who has heard through social media or various articles or ads that you're anti-Semitic?
I think first what I would say is that there's no room for anti-Semitism in this city. And it's a scourge that I would root out of the 5 boroughs as someone who will be leading the entirety of the city. And I lead this city not just to lead Jewish New Yorkers who vote for me, but frankly, any Jewish New Yorker and any New Yorker who calls this city home. And a few weeks ago, I was on the M57, which, in case you're wondering, is the slowest bus in New York City, traveling at an average speed of 4.9 miles an hour. And seated right next to me was a speech therapist who introduced herself to me as a Jewish New Yorker. She told me that her daughter is a big fan and she phone banks from college, and she said that she herself was less sure about our campaign. And so we started to speak, and she asked me, about my thoughts on Israel and Palestine. She asked me about my thoughts on anti-Semitism here in New York City, and she also shared with me an anecdote of where she's trying to sell her apartment, and her realtor came over, looked at the books on her bookshelf, and said, "Take the Jewish books off." And I told her that that was unacceptable, because this is a city that we're looking to do more than just protect Jewish New Yorkers, but a city where we're looking to celebrate and cherish those Jewish New Yorkers. And I've made clear my thoughts on Israel and Palestine, and I'm also running to be the leader of this city. And that means leading everyone, no matter their opinions on that subject or any subject, but to ensure that this is a city that they can see themselves in, whether in my city hall or in the city that they call home.
One of the top slogans and promises of your campaign is to freeze the rent. Now, there's some things you've promised your campaign that you don't have direct control over, but this is one of them that you do. This would affect roughly 1 million rent-stabilized units in the city. That's overseen by something called the Rent Guidelines Board, which you would have oversight over as mayor. Roughly 2 million tenants overall. Now, if you succeed with that freeze, what would the effect be? Obviously, we know what they'd be on those 2 million tenants, those 1.1 million properties. What would it be on everybody else? Because there are a lot of people who are not in rent-stabilized places in New York who still pay 40, 50, 60% of their income on housing.
This would be one part of a larger housing agenda, which in its totality speaks to all 8.5 million people who call the city home. And for the about half of all tenants who live in market rate units, as you're describing, facing these skyrocketing rents, we would also be building 200,000 new affordable homes over the next 10 years from the public sector, and also making it easier for the private sector to build more housing. Because one of the key parts of the housing crisis that we're facing in New York City is that of a crisis of supply, a crisis of production. And we have to make that crisis come to an end by learning the lessons we've seen in Jersey City, where for every 1,000 people, they're building 7 homes. Here in New York City, we're struggling for 4, while Tokyo is already at 10. And this is an example of how, for a long time, politicians have taken a language of New York exceptionalism to justify mediocrity in the city. And it's time to actually deliver excellence and efficiency at the heart of a public sector that we care deeply about.
We're talking about your social media reach, the fact that you do a lot of social media, you get out there, you've got a particularly young audience, the type of audience who may not be watching us right now. But there's a lot of money going into traditional media in this race. The most prominent of the groups that are raising money for this is a group called Fix the City. It's raised more than $35 million. 2 others have raised $2.5 million and $1.5 million, respectively. Some of the donors include Michael Bloomberg. He's given almost $10 million since before the primary, members of the Lauder family, the hedge fund executive Bill Ackman, the hotel and casino magnate Steve Wynn. Many of these groups are supporting Andrew Cuomo. How do you explain that to New York voters? How do you what connections do you draw between the donors and Cuomo's campaign?
I think Bill Ackman may be under the misapprehension that for every strongly worded tweet he sends out, he has to donate another $100,000 to Andrew Cuomo's super PAC. I think largely what you see with these kinds of donors and these kinds of donations is a desire to keep a system that has been rigged to benefit the very few in this city at the expense of the very many. And I understand why they would be concerned at the prospect of Andrew Cuomo losing this race, because it's not just him as an individual, it's also his style of politics, where access and influence can be bought. And I'm proud to be here sitting in front of you as the Democratic nominee, not by virtue of the donations we've received, though we did max out the public matching funds here in New York City, but by virtue of the volunteer team that we have built, of now more than 100,000 volunteers who today are on the precipice of breaking a New York State record for most doors knocked in a 24-hour period. And that's what this campaign really is about. It's about bringing democracy back to working people.
Let's talk about that most doors knocked. You're looking to break 200,000, not break. You don't want to break the doors. You want to knock on 200,000 doors today and break a record. Talk to me about this, because you have tens of thousands of volunteers. You have more volunteers than many people have voters.
Yes, it's truly one of the honors of this campaign is to lead now more than 100,000 volunteers. And what we've seen in these volunteers is that they make the difference, because for all of the money that is spent on ads and on a smear and slander campaign, for many New Yorkers, the moment that will actually open their eyes as to what's actually on the ballot is when they have a conversation with another New Yorker. And that comes from a conversation at their doorstep. It comes from a conversation on the phone. It might even come from a conversation as they're waiting for the train, which Andrew Cuomo defunded when he was the governor of New York State. And what we found is that in these conversations, it can get back to the heart of what this race should be about, which is cost of living. And so often that's been pushed to the side because other candidates don't actually have a plan to address it. And, you know, as much as you and I, Ali, may be living and breathing this race as well as many other New Yorkers, there are many other of our neighbors across these 5 boroughs for whom the struggle to afford the city is so difficult that tuning into politics is something that happens in the final days. And I actually had a friend of mine, Charlie, who went and knocked on some doors in Hell's Kitchen a few days ago. And afterwards he shared that he spoke to a man who had not heard of me as yet. He had not heard of what was happening in this race. And that conversation was what inspired him to take another look. And that's the way that we're going to win this race on Tuesday.
One of the things that somebody said to me the other day is, I can't believe I've got to vote for Andrew Cuomo, but I just don't think Mamdani's got the experience. He's young. He didn't have a beef with you and your views and your energy. He said, this is one of the biggest political jobs in the world. I mean, probably the second hardest in America.
It is an incredibly difficult job. It's also an incredible opportunity to serve the people of the city. And I'm proud of my record as a state assembly member, of someone who won close to $500 million in debt relief for thousands of working class taxi drivers, who won the first free buses in New York City history and stopped a frack gas power plant from being built in Queens. And I'll also be prouder still of assembling a team around me that has experience that spans generations and a number of mayoral administrations, because New Yorkers deserve to have the best and the brightest serving them in City Hall, not a collection of of examples of patronage politics that we've seen under this current administration.
Zohran Mamdani, it's going to be a very busy day for you. I do want to remind New York voters this is your last day for advance voting. So if you plan to vote on Tuesday, that's fine. 2025, there's no reason or excuse to not vote. Just take friends with you and go vote for whoever you wish to vote for. Zohran Mamdani is the Democratic mayoral nominee in New York, and he is a New York State Assembly member. Thanks for your time this morning.
Miles Taylor and Norm Eisen are back with us. Let's jump right into it. I want to get to this soundbite of Congressman Comer defending the Trump family crypto windfall this week. And let's get everyone's reaction on the other side.
The difference between the way the Trump family is operating and the Biden family is they're admitting they're doing this. You know, the president campaigned as a business guy. So as long as you disclose your income and disclose the sources, I think that's acceptable.
This is the head of the Oversight Committee. That's the new rule of American criminal law.
As long as you disclose it.
I'm robbing this bank. Please take the money.
Right, and let's also just contextualize this a little bit, which is that the Trump organization's income has soared 17-fold to $864 million from $51 million a year earlier in the course of his presidency. Miles, are the American people okay with what James Comer's okay with?
I don't see how they could possibly be. And Norm
Not when they
said
can't
it.
afford food.
That's we are not feeding American children, yet the Trump administration, the Trump family, is grifting off the presidency and making billions of dollars. I mean, as Norm just hinted at, it's as if to say, as long as you admit that you're committing a crime, it's okay. But we've seen this. We've forecasted it for years with Donald Trump. The man who said I could shoot someone on 5th Street and get away with it has now institutionalized that as the policy inside the presidency. And they're doing it in wide open. And look, I think that this is still not even a big enough news story, is we have very obvious connective tissue between the president's foreign policy decisions, the White House regulatory decisions, and his personal business interests. This is why this is in the emoluments clause in the United States Constitution. This is why this was called out by the founders, because that type of corruption corrupts the entire executive system of the federal government.
Norm, I have asked a couple people this weekend and last weekend because I want an answer, and I'm going to ask you now. When you think about what happens to the DOJ after Trump, what are the kind of changes that need to be made? What are the kind of laws that Congress need to pass a la Watergate to say, okay, we're not doing that again? What are those specific laws that you foresee that need to be changed?
Well, it needs to start with the Supreme Court, because the truth is that our courts have performed very well. Judges of both political parties have pushed back on Donald Trump. We need to have Supreme Court reform, for example, term limits, so there's a rotation of Supreme Court justices, perhaps more Supreme Court justices. That's been the place where the rule of law system has gone afoul. Second, we need to have enforcement on presidents profiting from the presidency where, as Miles says, there's an apparent connection with their official decisions.
Why didn't Democrats do that last time around? This is nothing new. Trump did this for 4 years.
Nobody.
2020.
You're right. And one of the
lack of imagination.
One of the damning parts of that Carol Leonnig piece in the New York Times and Carol's new book is the failure under Biden to imagine the degree of danger and to move the criminal investigations much more briskly.
But what about Congress?
Look at however you may want to criticize the Democratic minority in Congress, look at the degree of corruption of Trump's enablers like James Comer. You can almost see on his face, that was like a hostage video, Jackie.
You look like a happy hostage, honey.
The Republican Party has been taken hostage by this corruption. And then, Eugene, one final answer to your question, and I am hopeful. We need to reform the pardon laws. Donald Trump just gave a pardon to Changpeng Zhao, the head of Binance, that has helped his company make billions. That kind of corrupt connection is wrong.
It's just the tip of the iceberg. There's going to be so much more of that.
Miles Taylor, Norm Eisen, we will have to have you guys back. Thank you so much, and be safe out there.